This probably should have been the video that I made first. I'm going to make up for that today and show you the beginning of handling. I've got a Hobbytown Porsche 90mm car that I'm going to be working on, and we're going to pull it apart today and show you how to free up the front suspension. If these aren't free in the front, the car will never handle right. Those screws have already been taken out, so I can pull that apart. There's what the suspension looks like off of the car. And you'll notice here, this side is not too bad to start off with. The wheel kind of flops. That lower ball joint is fine. The upper ball joint is also fairly good. I'm going to polish it and we'll make it better. It should be dangly a little more. I shouldn't be able to turn that. It should fall freely and it stays in position where I leave it mostly. A little bit of polish and that one will be good. This side, however, when I move it, the lower kingpin joint's pretty stiff. So I'm going to pull these apart. I'll show you the tools I use. I got a drill. I have a tire inflator because it's exactly the same size as the kingpin when you poke it through, and you can use it as a counterweight to make sure that everything is free. This is a nail that I cut the head off of and then kind of tapered the end of it to fit inside of the upper suspension balls. And those are what I use to free the joints up. A little bit of sandpaper and some aluminum polish, and I'll show you how I do that. This is the lower portion of the suspension. This one happens to be a narrow. You can see an N printed right there, so you know it's the narrow. The only difference between them is the kingpin mounts stick out a little bit farther side to side. As we're looking at this one, this side is really stiff. That will never be okay for racing. If you just want to use it as a toy, it might be, but it's going to spin out a lot. If you ever plan to race it, that needs fixed. This one's a lot better. A little bit of polish will probably make that right, but it's not how I would have it. It needs to be loose. It needs to be dangly, and I'll show you that in a minute. Here's where I use the tire inflator. You can stick that into the upper ball joint, and if that's loose, it should swing it. This one stays in place. We'll check the other one, if I can find where I put it. It's still on the car. The reason I like the tire inflator is it just got a little bit of weight on the end. This one's not bad. It can move. I'll probably just polish that one and it'll be okay. But it's not as loose as I'd like it. It should fall freely. So the lower kingpins are very easy. This is what it looks like taken out. It's got a ball on the bottom of it and the little groove on the top for the C-clip. C-clips are right here and they're made of plastic. I'll put those with the spacers. And I'm going to put the end of this in my drill and then get some sandpaper and just spin it and sand this down, and then we'll test fit it back in a few times until it moves freely. Alright, that is how they should look when they're done. Yes, they do not stay in the position that you leave them in. They can swing on their own. That's a free moving set of kingpins. I might do this one just a little more. It's loose, but it's not, well, it's about right. If I take it beyond where it would operate, it hangs up right in the middle. It's pretty good. I'll polish that just a little more and that'll be perfect. I'll show you how to do these in a minute. They're a little bit more difficult, but that's where things can also go horribly wrong. If one goes flying off, they are rotating fairly quickly when they're on the drill. It's almost impossible to find them. So I'll make sure we don't lose those. That right there is how it's supposed to look. It's supposed to swing when you move it. There's no binding there. That's perfect. It also doesn't have any play. There's a fine line between making it free and making it sloppy. Now we'll move on to the upper control arm joint. This is a ball that has a pass-through, and it allows the kingpin to slide up through it in stock form. And in this case, it's kind of binding. It doesn't want to slide freely because that ball doesn't move right, and that hooks on the sides and makes it not move like it should. This is where I use the ball inflator. Stick that in there, and it's weighted. The weight of that should pull it down if it was free. Nice thing about the ball inflator is it can help you easily remove that ball. This is where I'm now going to put my filed nail into the drill. It doesn't have to be perfect. Mine's not exactly true. It doesn't need to be. But the ball will go on that, and because it's tapered, it will sort of lock into position there, and then I'll spin it, and I can then polish it that way. That's what it looks like in the drill. When you are doing these, once again, be very careful. I rounded the tip of this so that it won't drill into my finger. Also, it's going to be spinning fast. I don't know how many RPM, but it's a lot. And if that comes off the end, it's going to want to travel because it's spinning. So be very careful that you don't lose these. And I'm just going to start with the same 220 grit. And I'll eventually work my way all the way down to 2000 and then polish it after that. Keep in mind it does take a little bit of time. You are removing metal with sandpaper, and the upper ball joints are the tricky ones. The bottom ones, they're held firmly in a drill when you're spinning it. So I'm going to do this off camera once again to save you some time, but I'll test fit it periodically and we'll get these working just right. That is what it's supposed to look like. It's not sloppy, but it's completely free. I did the same process, 220 grit, 400 grit, 800, 1000, 2000, and then polish. And that is beautiful. That'll go on nice. This will never be a problem for race tuning at all. This thing is dialed. So I'll do the other side and then put it back together, and that's how you do it. I can show you the other side, but it's exactly the same. When you put it back together, just make sure that you put your spacers in where they go, and it's best to take them out and put them back in the same order so that everything is as it should be. This video is not brought to you by Hobbytown, but I like them, as you know. That's where I race. I'm loyal to my store. I try to buy everything I can from them because they allow me track time. I hope you support your local store as well, and we'll see you at the track.